Hello, welcome to the PocketGamer.biz podcast, Week in Mobile Games, where we chat about the week's news and provide some insights. I'm Craig Chapple, head of content at PocketGamer.biz. With me, as always, our deputy editor, Paige Cook, and our news editor, Aaron Astle. How are you both doing? Paige, what have you been up to?
I feel like same as last week. I've really not been up to anything exciting, which is really boring. But sometimes I quite like having nothing to do. It gives me a chance to actually catch up on some gaming and stuff. But it is Valentine's this weekend, so I will be going out with my partner.
Lovely.
Yeah, have a nice meal out, spend some time together. We are all together 24/7, so it's Valentine's every day. But sure, we'll indulge.
Yeah, Valentine's Day is always a nice excuse to do something.
Yeah.
Get out of the house. All right, thanks, Paige. Aaron, what about you? What have you been up to?
Yeah, nothing super exciting. I'd say my highlight's probably been wave of nostalgia. So one of my cousins has just started playing one of the Switch Pokemon games. It's around my age, and we used to play Pokemon on the DS, when we were kids. And I'm a little bit older, so I'd always have like the cooler Pokemon and then trade him legendaries and stuff to, steamroll the game with. But yeah, he'd said that he's just got Pokemon Sword, which is from a few years ago. And basically, so I ended up meeting up with him to trade him a bunch of Pokemon from my Pokemon Sword that he wanted to get. Because there's quite a few that you kind of can't catch in the base game, but they're kind of coded in that you could transfer up if you still have like some of the older games. So I'd done that like a few years ago. And then you can kind of breed them to get more and stuff. So I'd done that to give him a load of Pokemon that he couldn't get otherwise. But yeah, it was just very nostalgic, just sitting, remembering when we used to do that with the DSs. And you used to kind of put them, I guess, head to head almost. Like if yours was, if that's the way around it is and theirs is like that, you'd put them like that. Because we at least believed that made it connect better, even though it's wireless. That like if they were, if the top screens were touching each other, then it would connect better. So yeah, just very nostalgic. Then obviously now it's on the Switch, but just, holding them close together to make sure they'd connect properly. Yeah, kind of nice to do it in person rather than you can just do it over the internet now, but it's not the same feeling. So yeah, I'd say that's probably my most exciting anecdote from the last week, to be honest.
Evolved from the dark days of the original Game Boy and Game Boy Color, I guess, where you could trade for a cable.
I was going to say, I hear you used to need a cable to do these.
Yeah. And then one time my dad took me and a friend to somewhere, I can't remember where it was, I think it was a big shopping centre, so we could download a Mew to the game, because obviously internet wasn't like as easily available, I guess, as you couldn't just like go to the Pokemon website and download Mew. You had to go to like special places where they were providing it. And I accidentally deleted my friend's game, and he lost his Mew. And everything else, obviously. Yeah. All the level 100 Pokemon gone. That's because we had the Pokemon Stadium on the N64, so you'd have to plug like an adapter or something into the back of your N64 controller, and then in that you put your Pokemon game, so you could play your Pokemon in Pokemon Stadium. But if you took it out at like the wrong time, I guess, it would corrupt it and delete everything. Right, thanks, Aaron. As for me, I guess a couple of things. One, I've very much back into, not that I ever was out of it, but I started playing a lot more again StarCraft 2, so I'm well on that. I've got some new builds and some new strategies, and seems to be going quite well at the moment. My MMR is pretty rubbish, but it's about 3,100 for anyone who understands what that means. I think reasonable players could be like 4,000. Pros are like 6,000 plus. So I'm very far away from all of that. As always, first quickly, just a few shout outs for our events that are coming up. So I'll be at GDC at the start of the week on March 9th. We'll have Pocket Gamer Connect Summit in San Francisco. This is a day of mobile related talks. Then we'll be in Dubai, May 20th, 21st. We'll be in Malmo in May. We'll be in Barcelona, June 15th, 16th. Shanghai, July 30th. Helsinki, October 13th, 14th. Bangkok, October 27th. Jordan, November. And Gran Canaria in December. It's quite a long list to reel off. And obviously, as I mentioned before, we'll be doing the Mobile Games Awards in August during Gamescom, and next month will also be during PGC Summit San Francisco. We'll also be revealing the top 30 US game makers. Right, I'm going to jump into the actual news. So first up, As always, quite a big moment of the year. Supercell released its financials, and as always, along with that, the CEO Ilkka Paananen releases his big blog post. And in terms of its financials, so revenue declined 4% year over year to 2.65 billion euros in 2025, but that was a near record. Remember, 2024 was a record, at least the new way that they calculate revenue. On a non-GAAP basis, EBITDA rose by 6% to 932 million euros, and it said it contributed 220 million euros in corporate income tax, which they love to shout about. So they were pretty happy, and one of the things that they really talked about was the success of Clash Royale, which I'll go into in a bit. There's two parts of this story, I guess, which had a really big year in 2025. It was like its Brawl Stars moment, right? Revenue surged massively. One of the key parts, really, or the key part of the blog post this time was talking about innovation, kind of Supercell's struggles with new game releases and the challenges that the industry faces. So Ilkka said that the industry is at a crossroads as he sees it. He said, "Are we satisfied with the status quo, relying on optimization and incremental improvements to the great games we've already made? Or are we brave enough to dream bigger, be more ambitious about what this industry could become? And if we are more ambitious, what do we need to do to kick the industry into new growth?" I believe the answer is innovation. And he pointed out some stats. Apparently, of 53,000 games launched since 2020, 22, so 0.4%, it can't be 0.4%, it must be 0.04. Anyway, have grossed more than $1 billion. I feel like that's just a weird stat to point out because $1 billion is a rare achievement anyway. And then he goes on to say 20 of these titles came from developers in China, Japan, and South Korea. 2, Dream Games' Royal Match and Scopely's Monopoly Go were developed in the West. I guess it depends where you consider Turkey is, because it kind of straddles both. He said Chinese developers have a natural advantage in the world's biggest market, which is very lucrative with like the third-party Android stores in particular. He said Western developers have not brought radical new gameplay innovation to the market in the vein of Clash Royale, Pokemon Go, and Brawl Stars. And he said, rather than innovating, the industry has gotten very good at optimizing what exists. So A/B testing, incremental improvement, squeezing more out of proven formulas. The work of improving live games is not the problem, but here's the reality. Live game excellence alone doesn't grow an industry. It maintains one, etc., etc. What could have been, and then he sort of talks about the... I've seen what happens when an industry stops innovating. Remember the era of those downloadable PC Mac games with 60-minute free trials back in 2005? Eventually, the market consolidated around just 3 genres: match-3, hidden object, and time management games. Endless optimization, minimal innovation. What could have been a massive market became a limited one. Obviously, we do not want mobile games to end up in the same place. I also kind of disagree with that, because then obviously like these industries get disrupted by technology. I don't think it's because the games become samey. I don't think that's why the mobile market has grown slowly. So I guess a few points about why Ilkka would say all this, Supercell's position, and what I think is actually happening in the market. So I think there has been innovation, right? So Monopoly Go, it built upon, so you could call it iteration, but like it built upon what Coinmaster did, and it really kind of innovated with like the social features, for example. Other areas in that game, it's really polished as well, by the way. It's such a good game. Like it didn't make many billions of dollars just because it's Monopoly. It didn't make that just because it's a clone of a successful game. They obviously did other stuff with that. And then you actually look at China, which he did mention. And so you've got some of these Chinese developers that have released like hit games in certain categories, but what they've actually done is, one, they've innovated, and secondly, they've grown them massively. So for example, the 4X strategy space, Century Games and First Fund came along with Whiteout Survival and Last War, added sort of some hyper casual elements at the start of into those games. They've grown the 4X strategy market that is extremely lucrative. It makes what went before look really tiny by comparison. And they've innovated and grown those genres. Microfund's done the same with Gossip Harbour. It's kind of really just far and away smashed any other kind of game that's been in those genres. And then the interesting thing that they've done, which Supercell doesn't seem to do, is I guess what they do is they kind of seem to build like... I'm not going to be very good at explaining this because ultimately I'm not a designer. They kind of built these systems that they can then sort of build upon and replicate for other games. So, for example, you've got Gossip Harbour, then you've got Seaside Escape. I think Superplay's Elad Drury spoke about this at RovioCon, which was kind of how they do it. They build these kind of systems and they can build like new games, even if they're a bit different on top of that. And Supercell just has this thing big in its bonnet that they have to innovate. Like, basically, it would seem, at least from the outside, that they have to kind of start from scratch every time, build something completely new and hope it's a hit. Whereas I guess other companies that have been successful are doing it differently. So I asked why Supercell hasn't been able to launch the successful new games while rivals have. And to kind of counter some of Ilkka's points, I said, given that the company is highly profitable, backed by Tencent, has a studio in Shanghai, and has access to China's highly lucrative market. Because he said like that was the advantage Chinese companies have. But that is the same advantage that Supercell could have. And then he just said, I think the simple answer is that we just haven't been able to produce great enough games. It's very competitive out there. We'd love to be at the top, but we aren't. That's the truth. They continued adding simply that the company has to do better and build better games. I think that's really the crux of the matter. This whole, to round up my thoughts there, I think that the whole blog post was basically like a PR move and a call to action to try to get founders to join the company, because they're now offering these kind of new incentives of profit sharing to try and find its next hit game, basically. And it would seem to be like they're looking externally rather than just internally now at the moment for that. It's been 7 years since their last hit, and they can't just rely on live games because Clash Royale's revenue has declined a lot. Brawl Stars isn't like the high it was. Maybe they could do it again, right? With another game or one of these games. But I think they can't just rely on these surges in old games. And I think that's what they're kind of contending with. So next year's blog post will be interesting if none of that happens. Sorry, I'll stop there. But any thoughts on all the Supercell stuff?
No, not much to add. But yeah, it is just interesting. They're in this weird spot that, they've got numbers in some of their games. Obviously, they've got some massive games that are so popular, lots of people know them. But then they've got this other side of it where, like, being honest, they're gonna want a new hit game, right? Like I said, it's been 7 years. They are going to want that to happen. I don't know, this whole innovation versus iteration thing, not sure about that. But yeah, it is interesting.
There's actually a couple of things I forgot to say. So one of them as well was I did ask about, are you taking lessons from these other companies like a Century Games, etc., on how they've found success? And he just sort of skirted it a little bit by saying, well, they're taking lessons from startups from all over the world. And he said, basically what we're trying to do is we're trying to replicate what makes startups work. If you think about innovation as a whole, what type of companies mostly bring these new breakthroughs and innovations to the market? That innovation mostly comes from startups. And they're trying to create like the same kind of constraints and incentives that a startup has and put it in Supercell and hope that creates success. Like I said, we'll see. I've got more to talk about on Supercell and that blog post in a bit, but we'll go to some other stories first, because otherwise I end up talking for 30 minutes and nobody wants that. Right, so our next Paige, what have you got?
I was tempted to talk about Ubisoft stuff, but if there's one thing that trumps Ubisoft for me, it's Resident Evil. So we're going with Resident Evil. Basically, their mobile game, Resident Evil Survival Unit, it's reached a new milestone. It came out in November. It got 2 million downloads in under 2 weeks. Now it's past 5 million. It also recently just rolled out across the Middle East, North Africa. It got, full Arabic language support. So all these things are obviously good for its growth. It seems to be showing in these download numbers. And so for me, I'm a massive Resident Evil fan. I've got a lot of nostalgia tied to that franchise. So if you take someone like me, duplicate me by millions, I feel like is that kind of what's happening here? It's a long-running franchise with a player base that's very loyal to it. People will download this game just because it's called Resident Evil something something. And there's another mainline entry coming out this month, so it's on a lot of people's minds anyway. So I feel like it's got a lot going for it in the sense of it's fresh in people's minds. It's Resident Evil, and sometimes that's enough, and the numbers look good. But I feel horrible saying it, but I want to like this game more than I actually do, because it's such an odd game. So like the first 20 minutes of the game are fantastic. It feels kind of like an old school Resident Evil game on mobile. It's sort of like the odd fixed camera angles, you do some exploring, you do the odd puzzle here and there, and obviously, you fight zombies. Then that part ends and it throws you into more of a city builder type mobile game. And then certain parts of it, there's like tower defense stuff. And then there's still the like exploration thing as well, but you do that in smaller doses. So it's kind of, I don't know, it's a weird mobile experience where sometimes I feel like I'm playing 4 different games at the same time. And I feel like for some people, they're going to play it, they're going to see that first 20 minutes and think, why isn't the whole game just like this? And I feel like the obvious answer to that is if the whole game was like that, it would be a lot harder to monetize it. And I feel like the city builder aspect is where they get that monetization from, which I get with it being a mobile game. But then that brings me to the next problem. The way it monetizes, for me personally, I think it's very aggressive. So there's like certain characters that you can get for like your town, but you can only get certain characters like, like popular fan favorites like Leon or somebody like that. You can only get him by spending real money. And then sometimes you're locked out of certain things. Like sometimes you have to wait for days in real life for something to build if you're not willing to pay. So I would just say like with games like that, there's always that fine balance of, I feel like people don't mind spending as long as it kind of feels like, oh, I could get by without it, but it is just convenient for me to spend. Whereas this game does lean towards, I feel like I have to spend to get anywhere at the point I'm at. So yeah, my general thought on it is there's some great aspect in there, and I feel like I understand why like the numbers have gone up. Like I said, they've just reached out into new territories. That makes sense. It's on people's minds. But I do worry for its longevity because the game is just a bit of a mismatch of things with really aggressive monetization. So I hope it stands the test of time, but I am a little bit skeptical.
Thanks, Paige. Aaron, what have you got?
Yeah, so first up from me this week is a kind of Super Bowl related story, which is really more about the ads surrounding the Super Bowl, which, they can often be a pretty big deal. They were said to cost between like $8 and $10 million for a 30-second slot this year, based on reports. But obviously, they get in front of a huge American football audience, and then everyone else gets talking about it too, thanks to the internet. And this year, like, there were a notable number of kind of tech companies like Google and Microsoft and various AI things, and a couple of games as well, which had adverts. So there was a minute-long Pokémon advert. So I'm curious how much that cost, because I say like 30 seconds is at least like 8 million. And then this advert's also full of celebrities, and basically the purpose of it is celebrities saying what their favourite Pokemon is and what they like about it, or why they see themselves reflected in it, or whatever. So like Lady Gaga said her favourite's Jigglypuff, and then did a little bit of singing of the like Jigglypuff song that was in the anime back in the day. And then there were a bunch of other celebrities, most of whom I had never heard of, but they're celebrities apparently. But I'm really not into that world. More interesting to me was actually what people said for their favourites. Initially I thought it was just going to be all like the original 151, and then I'd be, going like, oh, these old people only choosing like Pikachu, they don't know the modern stuff. But someone said Luxray, which is cool. Luxray, that was from my first game on the DS. And then there was a footballer who said Zygarde, which I thought was quite a modern one, relevant at the minute because it's kind of the face of ZA basically, which is the newest game. So whether that was a happy coincidence or a little bit more as to why Zygarde was mentioned, but it was a bit of an odd trailer at the same time because it wasn't advertising any particular game. It's literally just Pokemon as a brand being advertised, and with the fact that it's the 30th anniversary in a couple of weeks. So yeah, on February 27th. And it seems like this is going to start a bit of a campaign that's going to go on throughout the year of basically, I guess, celebrating people's favourite Pokemon. So the Pokemon Company put out a statement alongside the trailer saying that, basically this is the beginning of a year-long thing they're going to do that says it's going to be calling on fans to share their favourites. So I don't know if from now on it's just going to be them doing like social media drives to get people commenting, or whether there'll actually be loads of trailers like this. I think they did quite a few things with celebrities for the 20th anniversary. Yeah, so that was the Pokemon trailer for, as I say, just for the Pokemon brand. And then there was also a Mario trailer for the Super Mario Galaxy movie, which is set to release in cinemas in April. So they showed off like a new trailer with Yoshi and him on a motorbike and eating Kamek and doing stuff with Mario and Luigi, basically. So yeah, mainly I guess it's that games brands are or have been tapping into the Super Bowl audience this week. Pokemon also had a trailer at the Super Bowl 10 years ago for the 20th anniversary, which we were then discussing because I'd mentioned that that's when they changed the slogan. Like they don't really use "Gotta catch 'em all" anymore. And for the 20th anniversary, it was "Train On," which I haven't actually seen for ages, but for like the whole of 2016, it was Pokemon Train On, which you didn't seem a big fan of, Craig.
It's awful because it.
Also not a fan.
The slogan, the catchphrase, it's iconic. It is Pokemon. It sums it up so well, and to change it is insane. That's like changing, as I said, it's like changing Twitter to X. Suddenly you lose like people saying, "I'm going to tweet something. So I'm going to post it." It's like you've lost like the iconic parts of your brand.
But you can't catch them all anymore.
But you still can, because within the context of the one game, you're catching them all that are available. That's ridiculous.
The only thing I can say for it is at least it rhymes. Pokemon Train On. That's a very low bar.
Yeah, but it doesn't make a catchy song like "Gotta Catch 'Em All."
No.
That's the main thing. Anytime I think of Pokemon, that song instantly is in my head. I'm like singing it in my head. That wouldn't happen with Train On.
That's why now all I could think of is Aerosmith singing "Dream On," but with Train On. That pops into my head, and I'm like, no. I mean, I that's a really great song. Nobody wants something like that for Pokemon. It's so dumb. Sorry, but it is.
Yeah, thinking about it, I can't think of the last time I saw them use it, but certainly throughout 2016. Like that whole year, basically, any Pokemon-related thing at the end, it would have like Train On. But yeah, much less prevalent these days.
All right, thanks for that, Aaron. We've got to move on to the next story, which is mine's kind of continuation of Supercell stuff. But following that blog post, there's been some controversy. So I'll kind of go through my story here. So Twitch streamer Jinxie, who's got 8.9 million followers, and he's lashed out at Supercell after that blog post, where Ilkka Paananen credited the team for Clash Royale's revival last year, but not content creators. So, as I said earlier, Clash Royale was kind of a key pillar in the company's new record-breaking revenue year. It was first released in 2016, so about 10 years ago now, and it was said to have seen the number of new players grow by almost 500%, and re-engaged players doubling. So last year, Magic estimates about $647 million, which was up 148.5% year over year. It's a very, very big growth. In the post, Ilkka references work from the team, such as the addition of new features, changes to progression. I don't know how to pronounce this. The Boltian campaign, which was the campaign with Michael Bolton around Valentine's Day, interestingly enough. While also alluding to word-of-mouth discovery and community sentiment as reasons for the title's rise. He did thank content creators in general right at the end of the post for supporting Supercell, but not specifically for Clash Royale and its rise. So Jinxie took umbrage at the lack of recognition for content creators in building the game's popularity. He was streaming it kind of early last year, in time with as the game started rising, and I guess he is kind of being credited along with some other content creators, but I think him in particular, of basically helping that game surge in revenue and popularity. Jinxie said he called that post and those comments, he called it probably the biggest spit in the face I've ever seen. And he said, and Mr. Beast replied to that post, which is on X, and said, "I only started playing again because of you." And so some quotes from Jinxie from his stream. He said, "Part of me, I'm so angry looking at this." I'm not going to swear. I guess you could fill in the blanks. "I'm so angry looking at this," where it's like, part of me wants to be like, after reading what the CEO of Supercell just said, I hope the game dies. But then it's like, I don't. Because there are so many amazing creators on that game, and let alone that, amazing human beings that I've met on the game. Where it's like, I don't want the game to die for them, but my God, this company is horrible. Like, literally horrible. And he added, "Don't you dare take credit for 2025 being the best year that the game's had since 2016. Let's not do that, because now you're rage baiting." So yeah, he is not happy at all. And I will say, just to add, that in January, Clash Royale's revenue has declined significantly. Still doing extraordinarily well. Generated $37 million in gross revenue in January, which is down nearly 50% from December. Ilkka did note in his post that fans had been frustrated with some recent changes, and the team was working to address these issues. But I think this is just a massive error, I guess, by the Supercell team, which does pride itself on how close it is with the content creators, has big content creator programs, staff that manage that, and that it always engages them to kind of for their new game releases. In the part of the PR push for founders, it said, why would you start a studio on your own? We have 290 million players. We have this kind of content creator group of content creators. You could leverage that for your new game. And they haven't then, I guess, properly thanked those players. Sorry, they haven't properly thanked those content creators. And they must see internally. I guess I'm curious what they see internally. Did they see that there was a clear link with the streamers or not? And then was it just kind of an oversight to not mention them? Was it deliberate? I don't know. Just one more thing that I wanted to add is just these annual blog posts. I love them. I think they're great that Ilkka does them, whether you agree with what he writes or not. But I guess one of the questions moving forward is it worth it from a PR perspective? What do they get out of it? Because Supercell is still a great company. It's one of the biggest mobile games developers in the world. But ultimately, it's not at the top of the industry like it once was. And so what is the industry getting out of those posts as well? I think it's good to learn about successes and failures. And yeah, it is all basically just PR, but it is interesting. I've spoken to just a couple, so only a couple of people that have basically said, why does he do this? And one said, who is he to tell us what to do when they've not been succeeding? So yeah, big controversy. We'll see where that goes. Paige, what's your next story?
It's just a quick one on some Roblox figures. Aaron looked through their 2025 financial results. Some interesting numbers in there. So the platform generated 4.9 billion in revenue over the year. That was up 36% from 2024. Growth actually increased quarter by quarter, so ending with 1.4 billion in Q4 alone. User spending also saw a surge. In the last quarter, Roblox had around 36.7 million monthly players. Overall engagement, again, huge. Players spending 124 billion hours on the platform. Very intrigued to know how many of those hours are just my niece alone. So I'd love to know that figure. But what's really interesting is what's driving a lot of the big numbers, which is often just a couple of breakout hits. So obviously, like Grow Garden, Steal a Brainrot, they pulled in record numbers. And I think it does to show how much one or two big hit games can help a whole platform grow around that. And it also kind of, similar to what you were just saying in the last story, Craig, how important content creators can be for platforms like this. So yeah, big numbers. I wonder if we'll see games like Grow Garden, Steal a Brainrot just continue to grow over this year, or if this year has its new version of those games, if something else becomes huge. Yeah, Roblox in general, I think I say this all the time, but it's such a strange platform in the sense of it's huge. UGC is such a big thing, and Roblox is a massive one of those that is leading that way. But then there's also just all the safety concerns. I feel like every week there's a new country that isn't happy about it. I think it was just this week, Australia. The Australian government were writing letters and wanting to speak to Roblox. So yeah, great numbers for them, but also just still lots of ongoing concerns around safety and how to manage that.
Yeah, it was just Egypt has just banned it. And I think Egypt is one of the countries that drives the highest number of downloads in that region. So controversy continues, but the company's doing very well. It has obviously done a lot of changes for kind of child safety, but is it doing enough is obviously the big question that's still being asked. All right, thanks, Paige. Aaron, what about you? What's the last one?
Well, to quickly add on the Roblox thing as well, I thought it was quite interesting that they highlighted how their sort of bookings had exceeded expectations and that they targeted growth of up to 21%, and then because of games like Grow a Garden, ended up increasing by 55% year over year. And they actually highlighted in their financials that they're going to be changing how they do forecasts, because they said because evidently a breakout game can come out of nowhere that they can't have predicted, the year before, whether that kind of makes these forecasts that relevant, really. So I think they said they're going to change from doing like yearly forecasts to just quarterly forecasts, because, to allow for the fact that these could end up being way off if, depending on what games are available on the platform. Like, clearly, they have had quite a big impact even on, just like how Roblox is going to be predicting stuff, I guess. Which I just thought was quite interesting.
Interesting that they would change it. I'm curious what investors think of that.
Yeah.
I just saw, like, for whatever this matters, investor stuff. But I just saw, like, there's like headlines, shares soared after the financials, and then you look at them now, and they've like declined today quite a lot, possibly because of the ban and the Australia issue. And then, like, if you look like over the past year, like, it had a real high in like September, October, way back to July, which is probably the height of the Grower Garden and Still a Brain Rot stuff. And even now they kind of smash their expectations. Like, share price is half that at the moment.
So I think it was August was the peak, like, concurrent users at least. So, but I think Grower Garden was kind of March through August time that at least we were reporting on it a lot for smashing a load of records.
Interesting. We'll see. We'll give it a few more weeks, see what other controversies surrounding Roblox, or if there's a bit, like you say, if there's a new hit that comes out. So thanks, Aaron. What else have you got?
So my other story this week is about Square Enix's financials. We seem to have no end of financial reports at this time of year. So they reported that net sales have fallen by more than 13% during the first 9 months of the current fiscal year for Square Enix. So they generated about $1.4 billion during the period, which was down from about $1.6 billion over the first 9 months of the previous fiscal year. And I also looked back and saw, so this kind of continued fall is even following so they're lower than last year, and last year's were a 5-year low already. So not a great sales figure for this 9-month period. And then there was a bit of a breakdown of different categories, not super in depth, but so they had like the digital entertainment category, which is mostly games across platforms. So that accounted for 57% of total sales, or just under $790 million. I guess that's over the first 3 quarters. So that was down 24% year over year in the digital entertainment segment, which is also more than the overall decline of 13%. Games for smartphones and PC browser titles were specifically highlighted for their decline year over year. Square Enix didn't actually say how much they'd gone down, but said that they had declined and attributed it to weakness in existing titles. And again, this kind of subcategory of mobile games and PC browser games also fell in the previous fiscal year, and then they've done it again here. So all quite a bad direction there. It was noted that despite the kind of overall net sales decline, there was growth in operating income. So this was actually up 39% year over year to almost 300 million. And digital entertainment accounted for 229 million of that, which was up 28%. So again, revenue, net sales are all down quite badly, but operating income is on the rise, which is the inverse of a few years ago. So Square Enix a couple of years ago announced they were doing kind of a reboot strategy to lay the foundations for long-term growth, I think is how they put it. And that strategy is kind of a multi-year thing leading up to next March 2027. And since they've what exactly this reboot strategy entails, it has sort of flipped those results. So before they changed direction, their net sales were kind of stronger, but their operating income was worse. And now it's kind of inverted, where even though they're selling less, the operating income is higher. So I guess that's worth noting. I'm sure it's better if sales and operating income are up, but it's not kind of all crashing and burning, I guess.
Well, I guess the reboot was just basically lots of layoffs, right? And restructuring, in particular, their Western business, or pulling back from that. Obviously, I guess their reset, their reboot, however they want to term it, is going to take a while before we see if there are any fruits of that. I'm still interested in your previous thoughts, Aaron, on like that they announced for their mobile business. Was it they were going to look more globally at the
Yeah,
for that, and then the next game was here's a game for Japan.
yeah, yeah. They seem to have a habit of doing that. 'Cause, yeah, I
Ridiculous.
wrote an article probably over a year ago at this point, looking at like, yeah, here's all the number of times they've said that they're going to try and grow brands globally, and then they just keep releasing mobile games as Japan exclusives. Like, so that one was Ember Storia, which I think is an original IP, but yeah, even some other titles like where the kind of main series is available in the West even, and then they'll do a mobile spin-off just in Japan, and it's like that doesn't really make sense with what you keep saying your strategy is.
Like, it's fine to do that. Obviously,
Yeah,
it's just saying something and doing the opposite. Square Enix, I haven't had a chance to read them. I don't know if you saw it. They're always very good at saying like we're going to invest in buzzword. I don't know if they did that this time. I'm sure
I didn't
AI
notice it this time, but yeah, because I think it was them that they were they seemed like they were going to go all in on like NFT stuff for a bit.
Yeah,
and then that doesn't really get talked about anymore.
It's always something. It's clouds. It's Web3. It's blockchain. It's probably AI now. There's always something that Square Enix does, presumably to try and pump up the stock price. I had a quick look on AppMagic at mobile revenue for Square Enix's portfolio. So net revenue, 2024, 370 million. If you flash forward to 2025, that was 370 down to 233 million. So, I mean, whilst most would love that, that's like a pretty dramatic fall.
And for a company with IPs like Final Fantasy and stuff as well.
I wonder how fans feel. Sorry, I'm going to start again. Fans feel about the Final Fantasy franchise as it stands at the moment. Because source of one, but you hear like this guy. There's this YouTuber called and Twitch streamer called Sebi Webs, and he became very popular through his streams of Clair Obscur. And now Clair Obscur is like well known for everyone being very much inspired by Final Fantasy, but it's like the game of the year last year. Why can't Square Enix do that? They've kind of moved away a lot from turn-based and been much more action-oriented. Anyways, so Sebi Webb's who has very good knowledge of the Final Fantasy series. It was a huge fan. It's just interesting to hear his takes on like where Square Enix has gone really wrong, and he doesn't like as personal like the Final Fantasy VII remakes. I think I'm correct in saying that. I hope I have. But he has criticisms of them, at least compared to the originals. I think is a better way to put that. But I'm just curious, like how much. It's a bit strong way to put it, but like damage that franchise has received over the years to like the core fan base. And then moving forward, even if they kind of sort out things internally at Square Enix, that's going to take quite a few years. And, if they released a quote-unquote good Final Fantasy game that leverages some of the more classic takes on the franchise, I guess, like will things improve financially for them, or is Final Fantasy just not what it was? That's a really weird, long way of saying it. But I just wonder how the IP stands as from reputation. Right, anyway, okay, enough of me rambling. So that brings us to the end of the week in mobile games. Thank you very much, Aaron and Paige, for your insights today. That was great.
Yeah, nice to be here.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in and listening, and have a good one. Goodbye.